The tale of a father and a nanny arrested in connection with a brutal double murder involving the father's wife and another man from a fetish dating site sounds like the plot of a dark thriller. However, it is a chilling, real-life event that unfolded in 2023, revealing a web of betrayal, desire, and violence. This tragic story, rooted in a love triangle gone horribly wrong, captivated the media and the public, as the intimate details of the crime were slowly revealed. At the center of this story is the father, a seemingly ordinary man with a wife and family, who found himself entangled in an affair with the family's nanny. The father, whose name is Brendan Banfield, lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. From the outside, he appeared to be living a normal, middle-class life with his wife, who was a well-respected figure in the local community. The nanny, who was supposed to care for the children, quickly became more than just an employee. She entered into a romantic relationship with Brendan Banfield, creating a complicated love triangle. It wasn't long before this secret relationship, fueled by jealousy, betrayal, and intense emotions, turned deadly. The third individual in this twisted plot was a man the wife had reportedly met on a fetish dating site. The victim, described as a man who shared an interest in BDSM and alternative lifestyles, was entangled in the couple's personal drama in ways that eventually led to his death. It was through this online connection that the wife sought an outlet, but instead, she became the victim of a grisly murder. The Brendan affair with the nanny marked the beginning of the breakdown of his marriage. While it is unclear when the relationship started, what began as a secret liaison eventually became an open secret in the household, leading to tension, fights, and, ultimately, violence. The nanny, who had once cared for the children, had now assumed a different role in the household, adding fuel to the already unstable relationship between the husband and wife. The introduction of the man from the fetish dating site into the narrative added another layer of complexity. The wife, perhaps seeking emotional or physical fulfillment outside of her crumbling marriage, formed a relationship with this man. It is not entirely clear how much the husband knew about his wife's involvement with someone else, but what is clear is that jealousy and control became central themes in this toxic dynamic. As the affair between the husband and nanny grew more intense, so did the tension between the husband and wife. According to sources close to the case, the husband had become increasingly possessive and enraged by his wife's extramarital connection, particularly given its unusual nature. The introduction of fetishes, BDSM, and unconventional desires further inflamed the already precarious situation, leading to an eruption of violence. In June 2023, the tension came to a head in a brutal and premeditated attack. According to the investigation, Brendan and the nanny worked together to orchestrate the double murder of the wife and the man she had met on the fetish dating site. The details of the crime are disturbing. On the night of the murders, the wife and the other man were lured to a remote location, possibly under the pretense of a meeting or reconciliation. It is believed that Brendan, in conjunction with the nanny, had planned to murder both individuals out of a sense of rage and betrayal. What followed was a violent assault, with both victims being killed in a cold and calculated manner. Authorities discovered the bodies of the wife and the man in what appeared to be a staged crime scene, designed to mislead investigators. However, the forensic evidence soon began to unravel the truth. Blood spatter analysis, the discovery of key physical evidence, and the digital trail left by the couple's communications with the man from the fetish site all pointed to the involvement of the husband and nanny in the gruesome slayings. Following the discovery of the bodies, investigators quickly turned their attention to Brendan and Nanny, whose stories did not hold up under scrutiny. Both were arrested and charged with the murders. The nanny, who had initially denied any involvement, later confessed during police interrogation, revealing the full extent of the plot to kill the wife and her lover. The case, which had already drawn national attention due to the sensational nature of the crime, took on an even darker tone when details of the couple's involvement in the fetish community emerged. The media seized on the lurid aspects of the story, with headlines focusing on the BDSM elements, the love triangle, and the disturbing psychological dynamics that led to the murders. Both Brendan and Nanny now face multiple charges, including first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. Their trial, which is expected to take place in the coming months, will likely delve even deeper into the twisted motivations behind the killings. One of the key questions that remains is, why did Brendan and Nanny commit such a heinous crime? According to psychologists who have examined the case, the murders appeared to have been motivated by a combination of jealousy, possessiveness, and a desire for control. Brendan, who had lost his grip on his marriage and his family, may have felt that the only way to regain control was through violence. The nanny's role in the crime is equally complex. While she may have been manipulated by the Brendan, investigators believe that she was a willing participant, driven by her own desires and her emotional connection to him. Together, they formed a deadly partnership, bound by their mutual hatred for the wife and the man who had come between them. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of this story is the impact on the children who were left behind. Brendan's children, who had once been cared for by both their mother and the nanny, are now without either of them. The psychological toll of losing their mother and seeing their father arrested for her murder will undoubtedly have lasting effects on their lives. In the wake of the crime, the children were placed in the care of relatives, who are doing their best to shield them from the worst of the media coverage and the horror of the situation. However, the scars of what has happened will remain with them for years to come. Brendan and Nanny arrested for the double murder of the wife, and her lover have left behind a legacy of pain, confusion, and devastation. This story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of jealousy, betrayal, and the lengths to which people will go when consumed by emotional turmoil. The dark undercurrents of this case, extramarital affairs, the involvement of the fetish community, and the complex psychological dynamics between the three main players have fascinated and horrified the public. As the trial approaches, many questions remain about what truly drove these two individuals to commit such a brutal act of violence. Ultimately, the case will be remembered not only for its shocking details but also for the lives destroyed by a love triangle that spiraled into murder. In the end, it stands as a stark reminder of how human emotions, when left unchecked, can lead to unimaginable tragedy. As Brendan and the nanny faced trial for the double slaying, the legal proceedings became the center of public attention. The courtroom was filled with journalists, legal experts, and members of the public, all eager to witness how the story of betrayal, murder, and dark desires would unfold in the justice system. The prosecution laid out a detailed and disturbing case, portraying Brendan and Nanny as cold, calculating conspirators who meticulously planned the murders to eliminate the wife and her lover. The prosecution's argument hinged on key evidence, including digital communications, forensic findings, and the nanny's confession. Brendan and Nanny had exchanged numerous messages that indicated their plan to murder the wife and her lover. Investigators recovered texts between the two that discussed various ways to carry out the murders and cover up their involvement. The prosecution argued that these messages clearly demonstrated premeditation. Forensic evidence further strengthened the case against the defendants. DNA traces, blood patterns, and fingerprints tied both Brendan and the nanny to the crime scene, leaving little room for doubt about their involvement. The crime scene, though initially staged, had numerous inconsistencies that forensic experts pointed out during the trial. The manner in which the victims were killed, both through strangulation and blunt force trauma, pointed to the personal and intimate nature of the crime, reinforcing the theory that the murders were driven by jealousy and hatred. The defense, meanwhile, tried to cast doubt on the nanny's confession, arguing that she had been coerced into admitting guilt after hours of interrogation. They claimed that Brendan had acted out of a moment of rage, rather than as part of a premeditated conspiracy. In a surprising move, the defense attempted to shift some of the blame onto the wife's relationship with the man from the fetish dating site, arguing that her involvement in such a lifestyle had put her in dangerous situations, possibly leading to the tragic outcome. Brendan's defense team also sought to portray him as a man pushed to the edge, suffering from emotional distress and loss of control over his personal life. They emphasized his struggles with the breakdown of his marriage and his inability to cope with the fact that his wife had been involved with another man, particularly in a world that was foreign and unsettling to him. The defense sought to depict the murders as a crime of passion rather than a calculated execution. As the trial progressed, expert witnesses were called to the stand to testify about the psychological states of both Brendan and the nanny. Psychologists who had evaluated Brendan explained that he exhibited signs of extreme jealousy and control issues, which may have been exacerbated by his wife's involvement in the fetish community. They described how his possessiveness had spiraled into a dangerous obsession, particularly once he learned of his wife's relationship with the other man. The nanny's psychological profile was equally complex. Some experts testified that she had likely been manipulated by Brendan, who had exerted control over her throughout their affair. Others, however, suggested that she had willingly participated in the crime, motivated by her desire to be with Brendan and to remove any obstacles standing in their way. The testimony about the nanny painted a picture of someone who was vulnerable but complicit, further complicating the jury's task. Family members of both the victims and the accused were called to the stand, delivering heart-wrenching testimonies about the impact of the crime on their lives. The mother of the slain wife described the devastation of losing her daughter, while the children, who were spared from testifying directly, were spoken of frequently, their future forever altered by the tragic loss of their mother and the arrest of their father. After weeks of testimony, legal arguments, and emotional statements, the jury returned with their verdict. Brendan and the nanny were both found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and other related charges. The courtroom was silent as the verdicts were read, with Brendan showing little emotion, while the nanny appeared shaken. In the sentencing phase, the judge had harsh words for both defendants, describing their actions as calculated, cold-blooded, and entirely without remorse. Brendan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while the nanny, who had confessed and cooperated to some extent during the investigation, was given a slightly lesser sentence of life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The sentencing brought some closure to the families of the victims, but the scars of the tragedy would linger for years to come. The children, now in the care of extended family, would grow up without their mother, and would one day have to come to terms with the fact that they had been responsible for her death. The case sparked widespread media coverage, with the public fascinated by the dark and twisted details of the crime. Headlines blared sensational details about Brendan's affair with the nanny, the involvement of the fetish dating site, and the grisly nature of the murders. Talk shows, podcasts, and news outlets dissected the case from every angle, speculating about the psychological motivations behind the crime and debating the ethics of covering such a lurid story in such depth. In the world of true crime enthusiasts, the case became a frequent topic of discussion, with amateur detectives and armchair psychologists offering their theories about what had driven Brendan and Nanny to commit murder. Some blamed Brendan's deep-seated jealousy, while others pointed to the nanny's role as a co-conspirator who may have been more involved than she claimed. The case also sparked conversations about the darker side of relationships, power dynamics in love triangles, and the dangers of unresolved emotional conflicts. For many, the story served as a reminder of how quickly love and desire can turn deadly when mixed with jealousy, betrayal, and violence. The double murder left a lasting impact not only on the families involved, but also on the broader community. For years, neighbors in the quiet suburban area where the family lived would talk about the shocking crime that had shattered the peaceful veneer of their town. Schools, churches, and community groups offered support for the children, helping them navigate the trauma of losing their mother in such a violent way. Legal experts and psychologists continued to study the case, examining it as an example of how love triangles and possessive relationships can lead to extreme outcomes. The case has since been referenced in discussions about domestic violence, power struggles in relationships, and the psychological factors that can push people to commit unimaginable acts. The story of Brendan and the nanny arrested in the love triangle double slaying of a wife and a man from a fetish dating site is one of profound tragedy. What began as an affair between a father and a nanny escalated into a web of jealousy, betrayal, and ultimately murder. The introduction of a third person, the wife's lover from an online fetish site, only served to deepen the emotional turmoil and drive Brendan and the nanny to commit unspeakable violence. In the end, the case serves as a sobering reminder of how fragile relationships can be, and how unchecked jealousy, rage, and emotional desperation can lead to deadly consequences. While justice has been served, the tragedy left behind shattered lives and a haunting story that will be remembered for years to come.